I'm David Clayton, and this is the Way of Beauty podcast, conversations on Catholic faith and culture.
This is episode 49, and again, just like last week, I'm going to refer you to a link which is on the podcast blog, which is on thewayofbeauty.org, and because this is part 2 of the series of 3 talks that I'm giving for the Institute of Catholic Culture. You can also find the video at the Institute of Catholic Culture website. If you just Google Institute of Catholic Culture, then you'll find this talk. It's The Vision for You is the title. And this week I'm going to discuss the causes of unhappiness. Remember that this is a series of spiritual exercises that I was given 30 years ago, and we begin by establishing a first contact with God, or at this stage, this was my first conscious contact, if I can put it like that, where I was praying for the first time. And then in order to open up myself to God's grace, looking at all the causes of my unhappiness. And the idea behind this, remember, is that when we discover our personal vocation, the path that God wants us to be on in order to find Him, then that is the root of greatest happiness for us. And there are 2 ways we can approach this. One is to ask ourselves, what makes me happy? But in order to do that and to consider what makes us authentically or most deeply happy, at the level of the spirit, one might say, we need to remove from us as much self-centeredness as we can in the form of resentment and fear, our general unhappiness. And this is a technique by which we look at our lives and we just ask ourselves, why am I unhappy? What am I unhappy about? And think about what is the cause of that unhappiness, which is always, according to this, my response to events around me. I suffer under the delusion that happiness depends on events around me and my environment being according to my liking. And if only this were the case, or if only that were the case, I would be happy. Now that's very natural, and I fall into that still, that frame of thinking, but it never helps me. That the answer to, as regards to why I can be happy is always, I need to find God. And so I can do all the good things that the faith teaches us, but also just look at my conscience and say, why am I unhappy? And so this is the technique of rooting out resentment and fear. And once we do this, then we are more open to God's grace. And then when we ask ourselves that question, what makes me happy, we're more likely to reach for the thing which is gives us authentic happiness, what you might call the deepest and most profound and most permanent happiness, which ultimately, of course, is God. But we seek the things which are consistent with that and will take us on that path. I also discuss, and this might be of interest to people, because this is a very detailed examination of conscience, more detailed, for example, than a general review, which I would ever do before going into confession. I'm looking at the minutiae of what is troubling me. And so I talk about the risk of scrupulosity. And so some people may find that interesting. I just speak for myself here, but I know that the problem for me is not the detail that I go into when I look at my sin, and sin here being not just the things I do, but my attitude which separates me from God, my self-centeredness, a state of separation from God. If that detail is correct, then that's fine. And I can do this on a daily basis. The problem is that having located it and acknowledged it, if I don't trust God and have faith in his love, that I am forgiven as soon as I acknowledge this, and that only really the big sins, the mortal sins, do I absolutely need to go to confession for. But simply the acknowledgement of them and praising God and acknowledging the minutiae of my daily behavior, which is taking me away, and my attitude, which is taking me away from God. That is a good thing. That is a luxury that I can have through this process. And when I trust in God's mercy, for the most part, that process of confession of the little sins on a daily basis, by going through that process, I participate in the confession that I take to the priest, which I typically do monthly. And as I say, I don't take everything which I find in this analysis to my priest on the monthly basis. I might refer to it generally, and I just bring up the bigger things, or the things that are troubling me most. And so this is a wonderful supplement, if you like, to what you might call a sacramental confession. When I say that, I don't mean, I believe that this review of conscience, which I do on a daily basis, participates in that sacrament in some way. That is the power of it, because when I do it, my unhappiness does dissipate. Anyway, see what you think. And once again, I just want to remind you that we have a book coming out, Painting the Nude. So for those who want to know about John Paul II's theology of the body and how that impacts on our choices of painting and how we approach the painting of the human figure, I'm sure you're going to find that very interesting.
You've been listening to the Way of Beauty podcast, conversations on Catholic faith and culture. If you enjoyed this episode, then please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. This will help others to find it too. Also, if you're interested in delving more deeply into the material that we discuss, you can do a course at the Pontifex University website. That's pontifex.university.